And I'd like to start by welcoming Secretary Vilsack. Joining the Secretary is Mr. John Rapp, Budget Director for the Department of Agriculture, and we welcome both of you here today. This is my first hearing as chairman of this subcommittee, and I'm looking forward to a good discussion on the fiscal year 2024 budget request for the Department of Agriculture. The programs and activities of this department affect every single American, from farmers and rural communities to children and families who depend on healthy and nutritious food. This subcommittee must ensure that USDA has the resources you need to fulfill your broad and absolutely critical mission. The budget request for USDA is ambitious, and it includes significant increases across the board. The request totals $24.5 billion, which is an increase of $2 billion. I am pleased that the budget focuses on providing tools to producers in rural communities to address the climate crisis, and it calls for coordination of climate solutions across the entire department. I look forward to discussing some of these initiatives and how this subcommittee can play a role in this critical issue. We also know that affordable housing is a major challenge, not just in my home state of New Mexico, but really across the nation, and particularly in rural areas. The budget includes much-needed increases and innovative policy proposals to grow our affordable housing stock in rural communities and ensure that all Americans can access a safe and affordable place to call home. Another issue of great importance to both of us is ensuring that our children can receive healthy and nutritious food. Without this, our children simply do not learn as effectively, do not thrive. So I am pleased to see increases to vital nutrition programs. It is clear that USDA has much work to do, and I look forward to a robust discussion today. I'm looking forward to starting the appropriations process and working with all the members of this subcommittee to draft an agriculture bill that supports these vital programs. I want to briefly reiterate the importance of reaching a bipartisan top-line agreement. We must invest in non-defense programs if we want to move this country forward. We have important work to do, and we need to come together to bring back regular order. That will not be easy, but I stand ready to work with every member as we continue to move this process forward. And with that, I will turn to our Ranking Member Hoven, for any statement that he may have. And I would just quickly add that I am looking forward to working with you and continuing the bipartisan tradition of this subcommittee.
Thanks, Chairman Heinrich. Appreciate it. I look forward to working with you as well. Welcome back, Secretary Vilsack. Appreciate you being here. We saw you on the Hill here a week or so ago, and appreciate your diligence and certainly respect your knowledge of the Department of Agriculture, having served 8 years prior and back in the role. And of course, I've had opportunity to work with you through the years, both in that role and as governors. Department of Ag affects every American every day. Our farmers and ranchers produce the highest quality, lowest cost food supply in the world that benefits every single American every single day. So what you do is incredibly important. What we do here in Ag Appropriations is incredibly important. And of course, writing a good farm bill this year is incredibly important. There are always challenges. We've seen that obviously with trade relations, with COVID, with weather, the supply chain issues, energy costs, all those things are challenges that our farmers and ranchers face every day, and that's why it is so important that we have a good farm policy, because when you look at our ag industry, I think it's absolutely remarkable. It's a remarkable industry where we've been able to maintain a network of small businesses across this country, unlike so many other industries where you've seen incredible concentration. But we've got those small businesses, family farms and ranches, in many cases that have been operating for decades and generations of families, and we can't take that for granted. Like I said, benefits every American because of this system we have, and we can't treat it like when we walk in the room and flip on the light that it's always going to be there for us just the way it is. So I think it's incredibly important we keep that in mind as we craft farm policy, and I know, Secretary, you do. This subcommittee has provided substantial support for our farmers, ranchers, producers, and rural communities Last year, we provided critical base funding increase of 4% for USDA research programs, 2.7% for rural development programs, 5.6% for the animal and plant health inspection service. And, you know, programs like that, again, are so important. I think sometimes people don't even realize they're out there. But we keep them healthy because of those inspection services that make sure that that food gets to people and they can count on it being, healthy and free of disease and other problems. Again, things that, you know, the consumer takes for granted, but food doesn't come just from the grocery store. It comes from the farm and ranch, and there's a lot that goes into making all that happen. At the same time, as we have provided more funds for these programs, we've got to be careful because of the cost of the overall farm program, the farm bill in total, the SNAP, all the different components that go into this outstanding network of farming and ranching and food supply that we have. We've got to recognize that we have a real problem overall with the budget, and we've got to be part of helping find solutions that work. That's got to be an important part of what we do. What I would submit to you, and I'll be intrigued to hear your comments on it, Secretary, when we get into the Q&A, is that by doing a good job on crop insurance and the countercyclical safety net, we make sure those farmers can produce more food of the highest quality with incredible variety that keeps the food costs for the consumer as one of the lowest percentage of their budgets of any country in the world. That's not only important to every American every day, but when we look at the nutrition programs, it reduces the cost of those nutrition programs because more supply not only means, you know, more availability of food, but lower costs. So getting crop insurance and that safety net right benefits every aspect of what we do and is critically important, not only for this appropriations process, but as we go into writing the Farm Bill. Again, Chairman, thank you. Look forward to working with you. And Secretary, thanks for joining us today.
Secretary.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for the opportunity, and Senator Hoeven, thank you for the opportunity to appear before the committee today, and to the members of the committee, thank you for this opportunity. This is an unusual budget, perhaps one that you have never faced before, because you have to put it in the context of everything else that's surrounding the Department of Agriculture today. Whether it's the investments that are being made in the American Rescue Plan or the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law or the Inflation Reduction Act, these are resources that complement and supplement, if you will, the budget that we are presenting to you. And the goal of this budget, frankly, is to invest in a stronger America and to expand our middle class, as the President likes to say, from the bottom up and the middle out. And there's no better opportunity to do that than within the agricultural budget. I would make one observation and one request of this committee, that you take a look at the percentage increases of this committee over time and compare it to the percentage increases of other departments of government. I think what you're going to find, even in the non-discretionary, non-defense discretionary budget, the increases in this department's budget have been modest compared to other agencies. So as you look at choices that have to be made, I hope that factor is taken into consideration, given the importance of this department and the work of this department, as both the chair and the ranking member have indicated. When we look at making a stronger America and expanding the middle class, there are things like the investments that we're proposing in research surrounding clean energy and climate that will help to create that middle class. Whether it's developing a new industry, sustainable aviation fuel, or other bio-based products, the idea here is to create not just better energy sources, but also income sources for our farmers. As Senator Hoeven knows, having listened to this before during the Farm Bill hearing at the Senate Ag Committee, we've had a record year in farm income in the last 2 years. However, that bounty has not been fully shared by all farmers. Nearly 50% of farmers during those record years did not make any money. Another 40% or so made money, but the majority of money they made came from off-farm income. So we had some farmers, those who sell more than $1 million in product, do very, very well in this economy. but I think we still have a job to do for the other 90%. So investments in research to create new opportunities, new income opportunities, is a way of maintaining those small and mid-sized farming operations. We're asking for increases in investment in staff at NRCS. Why? Because we want to provide more technical assistance to farmers who are embracing climate-smart practices. And we know that when they do, they can qualify for ecosystem service market opportunities, which create another revenue source that is not currently available to many farmers. It's not just about asking for more money, it's also about asking for legislative changes. We'd like to be able to open up more credit opportunities for beginning farmers. We'd like to take a look at the time and the number of times farmers can come back to the Farm Service Agency for assistance and help so they can stay on the farm, extending the number of years that they can borrow from the USDA. It's proposed legislative changes in the rural development to preserve rental assistance. We are facing a circumstance and situation where a number of rental units could be lost as mortgages get paid off. Rental assistance units are lost. The amount of vouchers that we are provided basically take care of about 35 projects each year. The circumstances today are that we're losing about 80 projects per year. So we're losing literally potentially tens of thousands of rental assistance units in rural America at a time when we need affordable housing. It's protecting farmers from unfair practices in the marketplace, which is why we're asking for continued support for our packers and stockyards. There is a competing view, obviously, to this budget that we've proposed, and that competing view has suggested significant reductions across the board. And I want you all to have an understanding of the degree to which those budget cuts would impact and affect this department. If those budget cuts, even the most conservative budget cut, that is to say, putting it back to levels of several years ago, would result not in an increase in WIC participation, but perhaps many as 250,000 participants in WIC not being able to be provided that opportunity. It would likely mean a loss of 40,000 rental assistance units in rural America. It would mean 84,000 farmers couldn't access the technical assistance they need to embrace conservation practices. It would mean 6,600 farmers wouldn't get the credit they need to continue farming operations. There are real impacts to these reductions. So that's the reason why I'm here today, is to talk to the committee about the importance of this department's budget relative to all other budgets, and to basically make the case that in the context of what we're trying to do to create new opportunities for farmers, new income sources for farmers, which in turn will create more job opportunities as well in rural America and create a revival of the economy. This budget is at a critical point, at a transformational point, in my view, in rural America and in agriculture, and I look forward to the opportunity to respond to any questions that the committee may have.
Thank you for that opening statement, Secretary. We'll start with 5-minute rounds, of course, 7-minute rounds of questions, I guess. Are we doing 5 or 7? It keeps changing in front of me. Sorry. We'll just get into the questions. How about that? USDA programs are just playing an absolutely indispensable role in the recovery from the Hermit's Peak Calf Canyon fire in New Mexico. The Emergency Watershed Protection Program, Emergency Forest Restoration Program, emergency conservation programs are lifelines for families who are working to get their properties back in condition, timberland back in working condition, ranches, et cetera. At the end of last year, we passed nearly $1 billion in supplemental funding for these USDA emergency programs, and I was just hoping you could give me a little bit of a progress update on how you feel the implementation is going.
Well, I'm pleased with the fact that Chief Cosby at NRCS has allocated $133 million from the conservation programs in a direct effort to try to address the 9 projects that are of significance and importance. And obviously, the Forest Service has been quite diligent in making sure that resources are being provided to communities. So I think the effort is underway. There is still more work to be done, for sure. We are not going to forget about this. We know we have an obligation to folks. I would say that I was pleased with the opportunity that the governor provided for us to have kind of the equivalent of a job fair in New Mexico, where we basically brought all of the various departments, all of the various entities together in a gymnasium and basically gave people an opportunity to apply for various programs. So If there is something more that we need to do, obviously, Mr. Chairman, I'm more than happy to hear from you and from your staff, but we're certainly focused on this and understand the importance of it.
I think it's important for people to realize that these are not one-time emergencies, because you have the emergency, and in this case, that fire lasted a really long time. People are out of their homes. And then you have the floods that come afterwards. Every year we have, about half of our precipitation in the late summer in what we call the monsoon season. And then you're just right back in emergency situations once again. And so the coordination between all the departments that are really helping with this recovery is much appreciated, and we will continue that dialogue. Chronic wasting disease is an issue of particular importance to both the ranking member and myself. We passed some new authorities last year with the Chronic Wasting Disease and Research Management Act. As you know, CWD is a fatal disease that affects deer, elk, and moose. Secretary, could you provide just a little bit of an update on the department's implementation of this legislation?
We're using the resources that you all have provided and the direction you've provided to enter into cooperative agreements with states and tribes in an effort to try to focus on both wild and domestic herds. Basically, we're splitting the resources between those two. I think it's important. We also are looking at the role of research, trying to determine exactly how this is transmitted from wild to domestic and domestic to wild, so that we get a better understanding and appreciation for what we can do to mitigate the consequences of this and ultimately, potentially, hopefully, at some point in time, eradicate it. But we're working on cooperative agreements right now.
Do you think the herd certification program is working?
Well, we're in the process of seeking public input to make sure that as we implement this, that we do it in the right way and that we do it consistent with what people believe this certification program should provide. I would say that I would be in a better position to respond to your question in a month or two after we've had that public input and we've given a sense of how to design this program.
We'll circle back on that for sure. Rural housing, I want to focus on your preservation strategy for multifamily rental housing for a moment. For the second year, the budget proposes decoupling two really important programs: financial assistance for affordable housing rehabilitation and construction and project-based rental assistance. These changes will help maintain and improve access to safe, affordable housing for low-income Americans. And I was really pleased that the fiscal 23 Senate bill supported this crucial policy solution. Absent this fix, more than 500 families in New Mexico alone and 65,000 families across the nation could lose access to affordable housing over the next 10 years. So, Secretary, can you tell us how USDA will implement those changes if they're enacted?
Well, this was obviously a process which will require us to go through a rulemaking process, Senator, but it's really critically important that we get this done because, as I said earlier, we've got a circumstance where there are more mortgages getting paid off. As they get paid off, we lose those rental units unless there's a mechanism for continuing them. And we have a voucher program, but the voucher program is only providing resources to cover a portion of the rental units that are lost. And the reality in rural America is that those rental units are absolutely essential for small towns and communities. They're just simply, they're necessary. So unless we decouple, unless we figure out ways in which we can encourage reinvestment back in these facilities and continue to provide housing that's affordable for folks, we're going to have a serious problem in communities, which is why we continue to ask for the decoupling and ask for the assistance in making this happen.
Yeah. I want to ask you as well about single-family housing recapture and that proposal around the balloon payments, but I am over my time, so I'm going to turn things over to the ranking member, and then we'll hear from the chair of the entire committee.
Chairman, our ranking member is here, which I appreciate very much, so I'm going to defer to her for the first round, if that'd be right.
Thank you very much. That's very gracious of you, Senator Hoven. I'm really pleased to see the leadership of this subcommittee, as I know Senator Murray is, Chair Murray is, because I know that you will work very well together. Mr. Secretary, welcome. I very much appreciated your call earlier this year to discuss with me and to preview USDA's proposed rule that would significantly change the nutritional standards for foods that are served in the school lunch and breakfast programs. I think we can all agree on the need to have healthy, nutritious food served at school lunches and breakfasts. I recently met with the Maine School Nutrition Association, and they expressed some concerns about the proposed rule. I've forwarded their letter to you, but I want to talk about them here today. First, let me point out that these are nutrition professionals. Many of them are registered dietitians. And their concern is that students may simply refuse to eat foods that have been reformulated to meet the standards in the proposed rule. They point out that there are already sodium and sugar requirements, and that they are already serving low sodium and low sugar products. So they say that with these additional requirements to further lower sugar and sodium in these foods, that the food begins to taste less and less like anything the students have ever eaten, and that it will likely end up filling our garbage cans. Erin Dowd, the school nutrition director from Freeport, Durham, Maine, summed it up perfectly in our meeting when she said, "An uneaten meal is not nutritious." My questions to you are this. First, has the department consulted with the frontline school nutrition directors about this proposed rule? And second, how will USDA ensure that these additional requirements do not result in fewer students eating school meals?
Those are very good questions, Senator, and I appreciate you asking them. First of all, we absolutely have reached out to those who are the professionals, those who were the heroes during the pandemic, who fed so many children and families during the pandemic, and we're certainly respectful of the role that they have played and understand the importance of the role they play now. For that reason, we have reached out to them, and we have received input from them. And one of the things we attempted to do with these rules was to provide a longer transition period. The reality is these requirements don't go into effect immediately. They are spaced in over a period of time, which I think is important to note, because it gives people an opportunity to make those adjustments. It gives the food industry an opportunity to make those adjustments. I would also point out that many of the reduced sugar products that we're talking about are already in the marketplace. They're already available, and in fact, they're being used in schools today, especially when the adult and child care program it's embracing, and with some degree of success. I would say that we're also providing grants, particularly for rural schools, to make it a little bit easier for them to respond. And we are understanding that there's a great deal of interest in this, and so we're announcing this week a transition or an expansion of, rather, extension of the comment period. So we're going to provide additional time for people to comment. And I would also point out, I'm pretty proud of this, that we actually made a $10 million award to the Full Plates and Full Potential program in Maine, and the purpose,
great program.
The purpose of that is to provide help and assistance. So we're doing a lot in this space, and we understand. At the end of the day, I think we all, as you say, we have the same purpose, which is to make sure our kids are fed well.
Thank you. In my little time remaining, I also want to point out that we've had very good discussions on PFAS. I know this is of great interest to the chairman as well. That class of forever chemicals that are being found in our soil, our water, our animal feed, our crops, and our livestock. In Maine, the presence of PFAS and wastewater sludge spread decades ago as fertilizer is preventing some of our family farmers from being able to sell their products, causing them significant financial harm, as we have discussed. While Maine state agencies, agricultural service providers, and academic researchers are already undertaking research relevant to the presence of PFAS in the agricultural landscape, far more research is needed. I noticed in the budget that this year your department is requesting $20 million for PFAS-related activities. How do you propose to use these funds? And more broadly, what role do you see for the department in supporting research relevant to the PFAS challenge?
We need to have a better understanding, Senator, of the full extent of this challenge that we face, and a better understanding of the impact of PFAS when it is found in soil, when it is found in anything that impacts and affects our food supply. So first and foremost, we need to have better research to know precisely the extent of what the challenge we're faced with. Secondly, we need resources to be able to begin raising awareness on the part of producers. Now, your producers in Maine and those in New Mexico are fully aware of this, but I'm not sure that all of the producers around the country are aware of it. So NRCS, I think, has a responsibility to raise awareness, to fill the knowledge gaps, and to begin figuring out soil health practices that can make a difference potentially in remediation. We also need to take a look creatively at programs like CRP and CREP to determine whether or not they can be a response to whatever we need to do to remediate the soil. We need more research in terms of its impact on animals and crops. And we also need to make sure that our food safety folks are fully embracing and understanding of the need to test to make sure that as we are inspecting meat, poultry, and processed eggs, that we know the impact, if any, of PFAS. So there's a lot of work to do. $20 million is probably not enough, but it is a start, and it's certainly more than the $5 million we got last year.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Chair Murray.
Well, thank you very much, Chair Heinrich and Ranking Member Hoeven. I do look forward to working with both of you and Vice Chair Collins and everyone on the subcommittee as we return to regular order for the first time in years. And I'll keep saying it is not going to be easy, but we have to live up to our responsibility to pass these funding bills in a timely, bipartisan way to keep our families strong and our economy strong and our country competitive on the world stage. And as this hearing should remind all of us, that requires a good deal more than just defense spending. After all, at the most basic level, we can't have strong communities if people can't put food on the table. And that's as important as it is obvious. We have to make sure that our food supply is secure. And that means protecting our families from unsafe food. It means protecting them from shortages, so avoiding and mitigating supply chain disruptions, addressing the climate crisis like droughts, which can threaten crops that all of us rely on. And it also means addressing food insecurity, so the food families need to stay safe and healthy is available and accessible and affordable. This is essential to keeping our nation strong, not to mention competitive. For one thing, and speaking as a grandmother and a former preschool teacher, our kids cannot grow and thrive in body and mind if they are not getting the nutrition they need, which is why the school lunch programs are so important, and why fighting food insecurity and getting family support is a priority of mine as we negotiate the Farm Bill as well this year. And as my colleagues know, agriculture is also a huge part of our economy. In my state, every day, apples and cherries and wheat and potatoes and pulse crops and so many other commodities from Washington State are shipped across the world for people to enjoy. But we need to make sure that our farmers and our growers are getting the support they need to compete across the world as well, including through the research happening at institutions like my alma mater, Washington State University, and across the country to address our water shortages and our improve yields and reduce inputs and a lot more. So I'm really glad we have the opportunity now to assess what we need to do to support our communities through the important programs here at the Department of Agriculture, and look forward to working with this committee as we put this bill together. So, Mr. Secretary, I have a few questions for you, starting with that growers in Washington State and across the country face a lot of challenges: extreme heat, wildfires, invasive pests, plant diseases, and USDA's research has supported American farmers and ranchers in adapting and responding to these challenges so they can continue to produce a safe and abundant food supply. This research is often carried out in partnership with our universities, like Washington State University, where students and faculty work together on solutions to these challenges. Can you speak to the importance of strong research investments in our nation's food supply?
Well, they are essential, Madam Chair, and I would say that this budget that we proposed is suggesting an increase in the AFRI program, which is the program that provides that partnership between our land-grant universities, historic black colleges, minority-serving institutions to be able to conduct that research. I would say, frankly, that as a nation, we have underfunded research in agriculture for far too long. When you compare it to some of the other areas of our economy, agricultural research has been underfunded for a substantial amount of time. And I'm hopeful that we get the increase that we're seeking because it does bear fruit. It does provide increased productivity, greater resilience, adaptation and mitigation of climate, new opportunities to use agricultural waste product to produce a whole array of bio-based products that can improve job growth and farm income. So it is essential, and we would certainly be willing to talk to you in more detail about precisely where those resources should be.
So bottom line is research saves money in the future and helps produce more food and all the things we need for our economy.
Every dollar of research generates $20 or more of economic opportunity.
Yeah. Mr. Secretary, I'm very concerned about the House GOP calling for steep cuts to critical programs like our federal food assistance. My family relied on food stamps when I was growing up, and my dad lost his job because he got sick. And so I really understand how important this is for people, and I'm focused on making sure that we support SNAP and the families who rely on it in our Farm Bill this year. As appropriators, we also have a role to play in making sure we have full funding for nutrition programs, WIC, school meals, fresh fruit and vegetable program. Can you talk to us about why it is so important that we fully fund the nutrition programs?
Well, the research has shown that the SNAP program has a positive impact on reducing poverty. And for children, it also improves children's health if, in fact, the benefits are meaningful. I think it's important for people to know who is actually receiving SNAP. More than 80% of SNAP recipients are either people with disabilities, senior citizens who've worked all their life but are living on a fixed income, or working moms and dads with children. There's a lot of conversation about able-bodied adults without dependents, but you need to know who those folks are. There was a survey done in 9 states. I think Washington might have been one of those 9 states. Taking a look at who those able-bodied folks were, what they found was that they were mostly men and mostly homeless, mainly homeless. And I suspect that many of them are probably homeless veterans. And so I think as we look at the circumstances and situations to try to assist, I think we should be spending more time focusing on states' efforts with employment and training. Your state, by the way, has one of the premier employment and training efforts in terms of trying to connect people. If you think about it, and Governor Hoeven, Senator Hoeven, now he knows this, states know who the recipients are because they administer the SNAP program. They also know where the jobs are. They also operate workforce development. And the question is why we can't do a better job of spending the $100 million on employment and training to basically allow those things to connect so that the jobs that are available are linked to the people that need them and can actually do them.
Thank you very much for that. And finally, in Washington State, I have a lot of constituents working on regionally important water storage projects in the Yakima and Columbia basins. Those projects require ongoing technical assistance and support from local staff at the National Resources Conservation Service. I often hear about how long it takes to work with NRCS or to get assistance. Underfunded local staff are stretched really thin, and it would be an enormous mistake, I believe, to make things worse by gutting these agencies working to conserve our vital watersheds. Can you speak to what the risks are to our folks who are working on these projects if we cut these budgets?
Well, the reality is that you'll have 84,000, even the most, if you take not the most draconian reduction that people are talking about, but the less draconian version, it's 84,000 farmers who won't get the technical assistance that they need in order to complete the planning, in order to get the conservation benefit that they seek for their operation. So it's a very real impact, and we have made a concerted effort to try to rebuild the workforce at NRCS because when I came back to this job, there were 6,500 fewer people working at USDA than before, and the morale was incredibly low. So we've had a process of trying to rebuild both the workforce and the morale.
Thank you very much. I absolutely agree. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ranking Member Hoven.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary, we have to do more to address the concentration in the slaughter industry, particularly as regards the cattle industry. I know you share that belief and concern, and there's a variety of things that we're doing. Obviously, we have to continue to press on the practices of the large four slaughterhouses, processors. Also, I think you are making progress with alternatives. We're working hard on that, and I'm seeing that in our state and across the country. And I think that's very important and very beneficial. But another thing that we've worked on, excuse me, is the cattle contract library. And we allocated $2 million out of this committee and the authorization to move forward with a pilot program. I think this is very valuable in terms of providing more information to producers in regard to AMAs and trying to promote more transparency and competition. I know you got your rule out. Tell me where you are with it, how you think it's going, what we need to do.
We put the rule out in January and began the process of putting stuff online. It's interesting, our team believes, by virtue of what we knew before the rule was proposed and what we are seeing being provided by the industry, that adjustments have already been made to some contracts in a positive way for producers.
Good.
So I think the transparency, the sunlight is an incredibly important tool. We're obviously going to continue to do that and to provide as much information so people can make a comparative reaction and a comparative study of the contract that they're being offered versus what others have been.
That program is important. The work you're doing right now is really important. We'll look to make it a permanent program in the Farm Bill. And so we're learning, you know, as you put it into play, the experience that you gather here is going to be really important as we set up a permanent authorization and funding for the program. So we'll be looking to that and drawing on the input, the experience, and so forth that you pick up from the producers. And it's really important because of the challenge of getting the various associations to work together in cases like this. It's very beneficial that we're getting that done, and that that experience you draw on is going to be very valuable to us to have the most effective program going forward. Cattle identification tags, you've got your rule out for public comment. I guess my concerns would be cost and any mandatory nature of that and how that's going to be handled vis-a-vis our producers. It's, what, $30 an animal, roughly. And so that, there's a cost there. I think your original estimate's about $26 million. How are you going to handle that so that we're not putting a burden on our producers out there?
Well, the benefit of this program is for producers themselves, because if we have an incident, and the chances are that something will occur, the ability to be able to identify where that incident occurs and to be able to contain it to a particular region, a particular farm, is going to be beneficial to trade.
No, I agree on the benefit. I'm just wondering how you're going to handle the cost and the mandatory nature. You know how our cowboys react to that stuff, so we want them to see it as the beneficial tool it is.
Well, that's why we've been working with the Cattlemen's Association and other organizations who are in favor of this mandatory effort. I don't know that we've necessarily had a conversation specifically. I haven't had a conversation specifically about cost, but I'm happy to take that back to our team and see what...
Yeah, I hope you're working with the associations on how you're going to handle that aspect of it, and I do recognize the benefit of the tool, as do they. Chronic wasting disease, the chairman is an avid hunter. I actually enjoy hunting myself, and so we work together on the legislation for chronic wasting disease, and he did a tremendous job leading that effort. Really one of the most important aspects of it is that for the first time we actually have domestic producers and the outdoorsmen working together rather than jockeying against each other, trying to get the funding and trying to get the research done that they want. We finally brought them together in this initiative, and that's critical. And we will, obviously it's authorized at $70 million. We'll work to increase funding. We're already doing that. What's going to be most effective here to advance the research, in your opinion? And is there something else we should be doing?
I think continuing to make sure that there is an appropriate division of those resources between domestic and wild, that we don't seem to be favoring one or the other, recognizing, as you just mentioned, the need for these folks to work together and making sure that they see that this program is benefiting all sides in a fairly appropriate way, I think is very important. And then secondly, I think making sure that we have the resources on the research side to be able to really begin a process of understanding how does this get transmitted and what can we do from a domestic perspective to prevent transmission. And we've got that issue, frankly, in a lot of other species as well.
That's the breakthrough, that we've got them working together, and then USDA working with the local, or with the state Department of Ag and their outdoor resources people, I think can really help keep that
Absolutely.
cooperation going.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Senator Manchin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, thank you so much for all your service and feeding America, especially the children. I appreciate it more than you know. I'm going to switch gears just a little bit based on rural America and what we deal with. You and your and all of your staff and everything, you do an awful lot more than just feed us. There's an awful lot of economic activity that goes on that sometimes people aren't aware of. And myself has not been until you and I spoke about what opportunities were out there. Here's the problem we have, sir. The Economic Research Service, I think was in your all's bailiwick, develops various codes and criteria to help define rural America. I look at it the way I look at it is about 66 million people live in what I would consider rural America. And currently there's no code accurately that captures the mountainous rural areas. It's much different. Mountainous rural versus agriculture rural is two different things. That's something we have not been able to see, and it's difficult for us to do anything as far as building towers to internet and all this, and delivering those services are so much more expensive. So the project was started in 2021, and as of today, we have not seen the Phase 1 published report. If you could give us any update on that, if you have it. If not, get back to me on that.
Well, I will have to get back to you on it, Senator, but I would say this is an ongoing problem in terms of the definition of rural. There are multiple definitions.
Oh, I know.
Which creates a lot of confusion and a lot of uncertainty. So we're happy to work with you on that.
As a former governor and serving, and yourself and I, we serve together, but as former governor, you have a lot of ruralness in Iowa. You know, the problem that happens, I've seen this since I've been here 12 years, is when money's dispersed, whether it's in education, whether it's in health care, whether it's in agriculture, whatever it is, the rural areas do not get their proportionate share. So if there's 20% of the population that's classified living in a rural area, in my state, I don't have one town, I don't have one city bigger than 50,000 people. So I'm a state of towns, 1,800,000 people in a state of towns. But it's as rural as it gets. And it's as wonderful, it's as wild and wonderful, it's as wonderful as it gets. But they get left out. And we look at the national money that goes to rural America, it's only about 7, 8, 9% of federal funding. Because I guess showing the biggest bang for your buck is better if you have 1 million people versus 50,000 people. But the services are just as needed. That's the problem we're running into.
Well, they are, but there's also a contribution that rural America makes, a disproportionate contribution it makes to our military.
Oh.
People often forget that a disproportionate number of our military come from those small towns in West Virginia and Iowa.
Appalachia, Appalachia especially. Let me go into this one here. President Biden requested another $400 million of the Reconnect program, okay, in his fiscal 24 budget he just put out. That's in addition to the $348 million we had in the last budget. And that is on top of the $2 billion in the bipartisan infrastructure bill. So we put billions of dollars out there. And what we're concerned about is, it's a mammoth for you all, I know that, but coordinating that effort to be able to administer, working with FCC, NTIA, and Treasury, how is that going, or where is the stumbling block?
I'm pleased to tell you that by this summer, we will have all of the bill money, the infrastructure money obligated. And the reason for that, we really have spent a lot of time trying to do this so that it will complement the work that will come next by NIT, NTA, and the Commerce Department and the FCC, because we want to basically use our resources to upgrade as best we can the unserved and underserved areas so that they have meaningful broadband. And then as the mapping gets completed, we'll then know where the real serious gaps are, which then will provide the resources under the infrastructure law for commerce and so forth to be able to invest through states. So we are coordinating. We're making sure they know where we're investing the money so that they are not, we're not overbuilding and not duplicating.
Well, let me just say in closing, I sincerely, in my lifetime, I've never seen anyone that has as much knowledge as you and as much experience in this job. Coming from where you came from and also the state you represented, to being in this position and the amount of years you were before, and one and done was not enough for the public service you're giving. And I just thank you because you can help us so much, every one of you all. I call him Tom, but I call him Governor, and I call him my friend. He knows more about how to help your areas as far as in getting other than just the feeding of America, but basically economic development. There's so much that they can offer in that office that we're just not accessing. So thank you, my friend.
Sir, appreciate it.
Well said, Senator Manchin. Senator Hyde-Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and certainly appreciate the opportunity to do this, and thank you for being here. And but first of all, I want to tell you how much I appreciate your staff reaching out to us over the weekend with the Mississippi tornadoes. Within hours after the storm, they were reaching out to the Mississippi delegation, and I certainly appreciate that. And seeing the devastation firsthand, you know, we have just gone into that mode of trying to help these people as much as we can. Most of this area is farming area, the Mississippi Delta, and other areas as well. But, you know, I just was up there for after the storm and the day after that, and seeing the devastation, you know, as resilient as we are. Before we dive into the details of the funding, I was just hoping that you could kind of offer some information for the rural communities that were affected. For instance, USDA's recent press release following these tornadoes stated Food Safety and Inspection Service is helping affected residents reduce their risk of foodborne illnesses. Due to the power outages that we're looking at, the Risk Management Agency offers several risk protection tools to offset crop production and tree losses for certain crop insurance products. But the Farm Service Agency offers the Livestock Indemnity Program and the Tree Assistance Program and the Emergency Conservation Program. Several things there, and NRCS can help address natural resources concern by providing the cost assistance for work such as debris removal. But would you please elaborate a little bit on the areas of assistance offered and how they can access this?
Well, first of all, I'd encourage you to take a look at the farmer.gov website, which has this document on it, which basically contains many of the programs that you just mentioned, but more than the ones that you mentioned, and basically the kind of disaster they cover and the kind of assistance that they can provide and the information necessary. That would be the first order of business. The second order of business is making sure that state officials and your staff reach out to the State Rural Development Director for the state of Mississippi. I mean, our heart goes out. As a former governor, I have toured many tornado damaged sites, and it is absolutely devastating to people. They lose their home in a matter of seconds, and unfortunately, in your state, loss of life as well. But the rural development folks can be there to begin the process of figuring out how do we rebuild. How do we create the opportunities for housing, for the community facilities that have been damaged or destroyed? What kind of resources could be available? And the Farm Service folks are there, obviously, to begin the process of assessing the level of damage so that crop insurance and any risk management tools, as you well know from your experience as commissioner down there, agriculture, that we provide as quickly a response to the loss of production as possible. So farmers.gov, state Rural Development Director, and working with the local FSA office, I think would be where I would start.
Well, certainly appreciate that because so much equipment got destroyed. You know, we're in the middle of planting corn, and the equipment is just gone.
There's also a disaster SNAP program that basically makes it a little bit easy for people who may have lost their SNAP card because the tornado destroyed their home. And
Yeah, they don't even have vehicles.
Right.
You know, they have no way, no mode of transportation right now to get somewhere, but we're going to recover. There's no doubt. We have some great folks there, but I just wanted to tell you how much I appreciated that. One thing I want to mention while I have a little time left, the 2022-2023 highly avian influenza. The outbreak is the worst health crisis emergency in U.S. history. As Ag Commissioner, this kept me awake at night, no doubt. But paired with critical shortages of veterinarians in rural food, animal, and public practice, this outbreak has been devastating for the poultry, turkey, and egg industries, which we are a huge poultry state and egg state. But it's also directly affected millions of families who are struggling to keep up with the resulting rising cost of poultry and eggs. But I recognize and appreciate that the Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service, APHIS, is working tirelessly to control avian influenza. But it seems as though having more food animal veterinarians and more vets in APHIS would be helpful for current and future mitigation efforts. But I also noticed that your budget includes $3 million for incentives to recruit and retain public health veterinarians for food and safety and inspection services. So clearly, USDA understands the great need for veterinarians working in areas besides small animal practice, which is great, we all love and we have to have. But, you know, it's just so much more attractive and lucrative. But the veterinary medicine loan repayment program, which your budget includes, helps alleviate veterinary shortages in rural and food animal practice government agencies like APHIS and FSIS by providing money towards the educational loans. So, you know, this subcommittee allocates the funds to this program, and a major portion of those funds go right back to the federal government because of 39% federal withholding tax, which is just incredible on that program, and it's taxed 39%. So only $6.1 million of the $10 million provided by Congress for this program in fiscal 2023 will actually be put toward the educational loans of the veterinarians and use to address these critical veterinary shortages. Can you respond to that to help prevent animal health emergencies and what actions we can take to address this shortages in both private food animal practice and in state federal governments? That 39% just blows me away.
Well, I'm happy to take a look at that, Senator, but I will tell you the biggest problem we have is retaining folks that we actually do get. They actually end up starting at APHIS, they're excited about their job, they do an amazing job for a year or two, and then someone basically says to them, hey, in the private sector, you can make $10,000, $20,000, $25,000, $50,000 more, why don't you come over to the private practice? And that is the challenge. Our compensation system has got to be looked at from, when I say our, I mean the federal compensation system, so that it's competitive, and we have to have more flexibility in terms of the ability to use retention resources to be able to retain these folks, because we can get them in the door. We're having a hard time keeping them. The loan repayment is one aspect of it, but there are many, many other aspects in terms of the lack of competitive nature of our compensation system.
Well, I would really appreciate some help with trying to offset that interest. I'm sorry for going over my time, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Merkley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Secretary, good to see you. And I want to talk a little bit about drought in the West. And in the eastern part and southern part of my state, we've had droughts that have gone on year after year. It's also associated with the lower snowpack we have in the Cascades. I was just up at Crater Lake where they showed that they've lost 240 inches of average snowpack over the last 90 years, complicating the lack of rainfall during the spring and summer. And the irrigation districts are responding by, one, changing their practices on the farm to get more crop with less water, but then also by piping their canals. And this piping has been essential because of the massive amount of water that's lost in open ditches through evaporation and groundwater. And that effort has been explored in an article, the Washington Post, The Future of the American West is in Central Oregon, which is about that vast effort to pipe to save our agriculture. And I want to submit it for the record.
Without objection.
Thank you. So this effort has been recognized in the Western Water and Working Lands Framework, and that NRCS philosophy notes that water management is essential, or we lose agriculture across a broad swath of the West. Are you familiar with that NRCS framework, and do you support that?
I'm very familiar. The 6 challenges and 13 strategies and the $25 million that we've allocated to
Thank
the
you.
Department of Interior's Smart Water Project. Yes, I am.
I knew you would know every nuance of it. But I asked that simply because there is a tool that was incredibly effective that I worked to revitalize with Senator Cochran, the 566 program, which had basically gone out of existence. And that program was being used to help with the piping of the irrigation districts in the West. And over the last couple years, the administration has shifted that 566 money away from helping with piping in the West. And I'm basically here to say, can we recognize that this is an incredibly powerful tool to help address the goals in the Western Water and Working Lands Framework? And can we move some of that funding back into the direction of helping the Western irrigation projects with their piping challenges?
It seems as if that would be consistent with one or more of the strategies to modernize the water infrastructure and to complete watershed projects, and also to do a better job of water management. So it would seem to fit within the strategies that the framework is called for.
It definitely fits, and I would appreciate any help that we can get. We have been able, through our community-initiated projects, to direct a small amount of money. This is, if you will, the congressionally directed spending, which in Oregon we call community-initiated, and I can tell you the irrigation districts are all completing watershed plans to be eligible for this program. And, well, I'm doing all I can to help them survive a very difficult changing climate where water efficiency will help save them, but piping's essential, and for that piping, 566 is essential. So I ask for your help in shifting some of those resources.
Certainly, we'll take a look at it, Senator.
Thank you very much.
Senator Moran.
Chairman, thank you. Mr. Secretary, thank you for being here. Thank you for your service to farmers and ranchers across the country and in Kansas in particular. You and I are about to have a high five moment. Thank you for working with me to pick a date for you to be in Kansas. And I wanted to give you a moment. I want to take several moments, but wanted to give you a moment to highlight a development that began a long time ago as a result of the 9/11 Commission. The Secretary will be in Kansas to cut a ribbon on NBATH, the National Bioagroscience Facility, designed to protect public health and our food safety, managed by USDA, ARS, and APHIS, and it will contain the BL4 biocontainment laboratory. You were there, Mr. Secretary, in May of 2015, now 8 years ago, a long time coming, but a very important facility and asset for the Department of Agriculture, American farmers and ranchers, and in fact, every American citizen and around the globe. I'd be glad to have you highlight why you think this, if you do, why you think this is a benefit to the American people.
Well, Senator, it absolutely is. It modernizes our process and our ability to investigate and to research some of the major challenges and threats to American agriculture, whether it's African swine fever or foot and mouth disease or some of the other 7 critical diseases that could cripple our livestock industry, which obviously would impact and affect our entire economy and our food security. In addition, this facility will also be where the vaccine bank is housed. And as we develop vaccines to try to deal with some of these threats, obviously being able to stockpile appropriately and safely those vaccines, incredibly important. There are also a great deal of research is going to be done on the countermeasures, the biosecurity initiatives that are part of protecting our livestock industry. So this is a critically important, and the fact it's taken as long as it has is because of the minute nature of the protections and security that is required as we move from Plum Island to Manhattan, Kansas. So I'm looking forward to welcoming and to cutting that ribbon, and I'm sure that you'll have a pair of scissors, and I'm pretty sure Senator Roberts will have a pair of scissors.
Well, I appreciate you being there, and I look forward to seeing you in Kansas on May the 24th. Thank you.
Looking forward to it.
Mr. Secretary, I was in Mexico City met with President Obrador maybe a week ago Sunday. Maybe in your answer to my question, you can explain your smile. I raised my concerns about the efforts to ban GMO corn. I was encouraged to hear what I thought was said, which was that the matter could be resolved in the consultation stage rather than reach dispute settlement. That was then followed by the suggestion that the United States and Mexico ought to do an additional study about the safety of GMO. Does the USDA continue to believe that the science on this matter is conclusive, and will it continue to fight to ensure full and fair access to the Mexican market?
Senator, the reason I smiled is because I've had 2 such meetings with President Obrador, and I'm fairly certain that what he told me on those occasions was exactly what he told you. And the reality is that we don't need another study. There are literally hundreds of studies about the safety of this technology, and that's been explained to the President. It's also been explained to the President that 66% of his feed needs for his livestock industry come from biotech corn that's grown and raised in the United States. The challenge is that he is very, as you probably found out, very proud of the white corn that is produced, the maize that's produced in Mexico. And I think he's put himself in a situation, a political situation, that it's very hard for him to move out of. At the same time, by virtue of banning the ability to have white corn from Nebraska or other states come into Mexico, he's asking us to acknowledge a non-scientific basis for such a ban, and we can't do that. It is fundamental to our trade strategy and philosophy and our approach to the rest of the world that we want a science-based system, and we believe in the safety and the safety of biotech products. We believe in the science behind it, and that's been explained to the President politely on a number of occasions.
Is there any question about what our trade agreement between Canada, Mexico, and the United States allows this?
View.
Thank you.
Not in our view.
Mr. Chairman, I would conclude just by telling that I would feel guilty if I didn't say this. Mr. Secretary, you and I have worked in your previous time at USDA on trying to export and increase trade around the world. I would encourage you and the administration that you work in to look for opportunities to reach agreements with other nations, singular and in collectively. Trade is hugely important, and while we face challenges in making sure that we do trade agreements right and they're enforced, farmers in Kansas and across the country depend upon the ability to export what they do around the globe.
Well, the good news is that we've had over $15 billion of additional opportunities in market access created in the last 2 years. So we'll continue to do that.
Thank you.
Senator Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, so nice to see you again. A couple of weeks ago, we had the opportunity to talk about the importance of precision agriculture, and I'd like to talk about an exciting opportunity from USDA Ag Research Service. As you know, over the past couple of years, Congress has appropriated $31.2 million to begin construction on a new USDA ARS National Center for Resilient and Regenerative Precision Agriculture, co-located at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Those already appropriated funds are going to allow construction of a research greenhouse to begin on that project. And I was glad to see in the FY24 request for an additional 60 USDA ARS employees to Lincoln. Can you discuss the need for those additional ARS employees and the vital research that the National Center for Resilient and Regenerative Precision Agriculture will perform?
Well, this is a process of rebuilding the workforce at ARS and providing a complement to the research that's done through the AFRI program, which is the grant program to land-grant universities. We're very proud of the work that we do at ARS, but we just need more people. We need more bodies, and we need the ability to recruit bright young people to make sure that we have a constant stream of bright people. We proposed this because we like working with the University of Nebraska. We think that they have a concept and a vision that is incredibly important to the future of agriculture as it relates to our response to climate. We're going to have to produce more with less. And the only way you can do that is by better understanding how to use the inputs that you have in a most effective way, how you can have seed technologies that are more beneficial and more efficient in how they use the inputs, and then be able to provide the information to farmers so that they can utilize that information in the best possible way to improve their productivity and their profitability. So this is an important enterprise, which is why we've proposed additional investments, not only of people, but also money.
And I hope that Congress is going to quickly provide appropriations so we can see the construction of the facility as well. In the Inflation Reduction Act, it provided an addition of $19.5 billion to several USDA conservation programs. Text of the IRA departed from the resource concerns agreed to in the bipartisan 2018 Farm Bill, and it restricted how these funds could be used to improving soil carbon, reducing nitrogen losses, or to reduce, capture, avoid, or sequester carbon dioxide, methane, or nitrous oxide emissions associated with agriculture production. How's the USDA interpreting that restriction placed on IRA conservation funds? For example, how will you look at a producer who wants to use cost share funding to upgrade their irrigation pivot, for example, so they can optimize their water usage? Would they be at a disadvantage under the IRA funding?
What I can tell you, Senator, and I'll get a specific answer to that hypothetical, I can tell you that the NRCS is focused on utilizing the climate-smart practices that we've identified that we are currently funding under the EQIP program, and using the IRA resources to basically ensure that those practices are targeted or benefited. I mean, the reality is, I think there are 45 of them, so there's quite a broad range, and the goal here is to try to encourage more of that. But I'll ask our team to get back to you on the specific hypothetical you've provided.
Yeah, that would be great. I'm new on this committee, and I'm excited to be on this committee because I want to be able to make sure that we're funding programs that work and the producers use where they're able to have fewer inputs and also be more profitable. And I think if we can make those determinations that really work on the ground, it's going to help not just rural America, it's going to help our conservation methods as well. Last question. The livestock is the biggest sector in Nebraska. We always talk about that. It's a huge economic engine. We have a meat animal research center in Clay Center, and I was glad to see the budget request included an addition of 15 employees at U.S. Mark, as well as an increase in ARS funding for their livestock production program. How would increased staff at Mark help carry out research related to critical livestock industry priorities, including increased environmental sustainability, improved production efficiencies, and really optimize the use of our natural resources?
Well, I think we're going to learn quite a bit, not only for the work that's specifically done at that center, but also as we institute our partnership for climate-smart commodities. There's going to be a significant amount of measurement, monitoring, verification, and accumulation of data that in turn can be provided to ARS facilities and to other facilities in terms of being able to educate them about what we know works, and frankly, we're going to find out stuff that doesn't work. And we want to make sure that we're not funding that, or we're not targeting resources to what doesn't work. So I think it's a combination of the research that they would normally do, but it's also learning from the experience in virtually every commodity, including livestock. There are a number of livestock projects in that Climate Smart, so I think you're going to learn a lot from that.
Okay, great. I know specifically of one PhD student who's doing research at the University of Nebraska, has been conducting it. She has for over 5 years to look at livestock emissions, and I think that is going to change the perception out there greatly by the public and really look at the benefits of livestock to the environment.
We need to reduce methane, and we can. There are strategies, and we also need to recapture it and convert it.
Yeah, thanks.
Senator Tester.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank you and the ranking member for having this hearing. I want to thank you for being here, Secretary Vilsack. I appreciate it. You know, I've had a number of Farm Bill listening sessions since this is a Farm Bill year, and these haven't been invitation. This has been opening the doors, let folks in, speak their mind, and we've heard things that you've heard, like the reference price needs to go up because of inflation. We've heard things like conservation programs like equip need more flexibility because we don't have enough well drillers or dirt movers to get these jobs done within timeframes. We've heard things like the crop insurance program, especially with the push of cover crops, need to be increased to cover a lot of those. We've heard a lot about food security because we both know that democracies don't work very well when you have a population that's hungry. One of the things that I've heard about that I didn't expect to hear about, but I've heard it at every one of them, is that it's really hard to hire people in our FSA offices. We've got 236 total FSA positions in Montana. Roughly 40 of them are vacant on any given day. Part of the problem is competitive salaries. The starting salary in Montana is $33,700 if you don't have a degree, $37,700 if you do. I can tell you, and you know this, Mr. Secretary, you can probably make money doing damn near anything else but being a school teacher, okay? That's probably the only thing that you couldn't do. We do not have locality pay in Montana. And so a place like Bozeman, which is where our state office is, where the cost of a house is equivalent to a house in San Francisco, you just aren't going to get people to work. You just aren't going to get people to work at those wages. So my question is, in your budget, do you have adequate dollars so that we can recruit some people? Because it truly is a crisis situation. I use our office in Choteau County, and they haven't, they've felt the turnover, but in some of these offices it's been devastating. And you know very well, we can do the best job putting a farm bill up, you can do the best job implementing it. If you don't have people on the ground, we're screwed.
Senator, I couldn't agree with you more. And this isn't just your FSA office issue. It's an issue across FSA. It's not just an FSA issue. It's an issue across all of our mission areas. And it is in part a result of the overall federal system that's in place. And we're trying to work with the Office of Personnel Management to get a better understanding of how we might be able to reclassify people and figure out ways in which we can provide more resources and more incentives for people to work at USDA.
So I'm willing to work with you with OPM. You're right. It is a system-wide problem within ag, within the VA, number of other agencies, if not every other agency. But let's say we get OPM to do that reclassification. Will this budget support it?
I believe it will. I mean, we are asking for more resources so that we can hire more people. So I think we have the capacity. The challenge isn't just simply getting people, Senator, it's also retaining them.
Yes, that's correct. It is.
That's actually, to a certain extent, that's an even greater problem, because as soon as they start working, here's what happens in these FSA offices. The loan officers in particular, they get trained by us, get trained well, and then a bank comes in and says, hey, we can make $5,000 more, and off they go. So we don't have we have the capacity, I think, in our budget to do some retention stuff, but we need more.
Well, I think
more permission.
I think it's a problem, and I wouldn't have heard about it at every group I went to. I mean, these folks, they didn't get together and plan this. It wasn't. I didn't give them talking points. They came in. It came up organically. It's an important problem. I want to talk about something else that isn't nearly as pleasant as not being able to hire or keep employees, believe it or not, and that is Brazilian beef. So I've just got to tell you, I've had bills to ban it. I think it's a bipartisan concern. Earlier this year, Brazil had another case of BSE. It took them 35 days to report it. I would hope it doesn't take us 35 days to report it if we have it here, although we don't, which is an issue that if we get it here, it raises hell with our beef industry. My question is does it take an act of Congress to ban Brazilian beef, or can you do it? And if you can, why not do it?
This was an atypical case, Senator. It's sort of like, do you believe in the golden rule? Because if you do it to Brazil, Brazil can do it to us. We actually have had atypical BSE cases. And if you want the rest of the world to ban our beef for an atypical case, which is not recognized as a bannable event by the WHO and the animal health organizations, that's the challenge, all right? We've communicated to Brazil our unhappiness about the tardiness and the lateness with which they've identified this. We're happy to help them with their testing to make sure that they get information to us quickly as possible. But I think for an atypical case, I think you are going down a road that is pretty slippery, and I don't think we have the authority to do it.
And I'm over time, so here's the issue. I don't think you would disagree with the fact that we raise the best beef in the world. We raise the best egg products in the world, and that's not brag. I believe that is absolute unequivocal fact. When we have a situation where we're having generational ranchers go broke because of an issue that you and I agree on, the amount of consolidation in the industry and the processing industry, and one of those processors is JBS, which is a Brazilian company, I think we ought to do our level best not only to hold them accountable and make sure they're following the Packers and Stockyards Act, but hold them to extremely high standards when it comes to bringing in Brazilian beef, because I think that's where most of it's coming through.
It's certainly fair that they should be held to a high standard in terms of the safety of the product.
Okay, thank you.
Secretary, we're going to try to do a quick second round if you're amenable to that.
I didn't know I had a choice.
You seem to be doing fine so far, so we're not letting you off the hook just yet. I mentioned the single-family housing recapture proposal and the challenge with those balloon payments. Can you just talk a little bit about how important this initiative is and how it would improve access to affordable housing in rural America?
If you want to create distrust in government, continue this process. People basically, they sign a loan document. They don't quite understand you're getting a loan interest subsidy and interest rate's going to be lower. But boy, 20 years from now, when you sell it or when your heirs sell it, you're going to have a bill that you're going to have to pay, and it's going to be pretty substantial. It's an outrage. I mean, to me, it's an outrageous process because it comes as a tremendous surprise, especially when mom and dad are gone and the kids are selling the house, and then they're said, good news is you sold the house. The bad news is you owe the government $27,000. And they go, that's not what we should be doing.
I don't know how we got here, but we need to fix it.
I don't know either. I don't know. There may have been a rationale behind it, but it undercuts trust in government, and to me, that's the principal reason for getting rid of it, and to do it retroactively so that we don't surprise any more folks.
Thank you. Both the ranking member and I have a special interest in bison. We actually designated bison the national mammal a few years ago. We have a lot of interest in bison production in New Mexico, particularly with some of our tribes and Pueblo producers. What do you see as the USDA's role in aiding producers, and in particular, like expanding access to processing opportunities for those producers?
Well, we've had two initiatives. One, basically taking a look at existing processing facilities and giving them resources to be able to expand their market capacity and market reach. Two bison operations have received those meat and poultry inspection readiness grants. I think if you're patient with us, within the next month or two, you'll see there will be a specific effort to provide additional resources for tribal processing, which obviously will be focused a great deal on bison. We've also, as part of our effort on food sovereignty with tribes, we've tried to integrate more bison purchasing and more bison in some of our feeding programs. And also, I'm pleased to note that the Partnership for Climate Smart Agriculture Commodities included several bison projects as well. So there's a great deal of effort, both in terms of creating market opportunities, in expanding processing capacity, and being able to incorporate bison into any climate smart initiatives that we're developing.
I appreciate your focus on it. I would mention as you're looking at that production side, the concept of shared resources for mobile processing is something there's an awful lot of interest in and something that bears some focus.
There's a loan guarantee program that we have that is basically providing resources for mobile slaughter processing. It's a guarantee loan. It's a loan program, but it's a guarantee program with lower interest rates. That's something that folks could look at as well.
Great. Thank you. We've had a lot of challenges with pollinators in recent years, and an enormous amount of our agricultural production is directly dependent on pollinators. What are we doing in this budget around ensuring the long-term success of a whole range of pollinators that agriculture depends on?
Well, we have a specific CRP aspect to pollinator, which isn't necessarily specific to this budget, but it's obviously specific to the department. There are research initiatives that are also focused on pollinator health. Utah State, for example, has a fairly significant initiative when it comes to pollinators. I didn't know that there were 4,000 different kinds of bees in the United States and 20,000 internationally, but now I do know that, in part because of their program. So we fund research, and we provide habitat, expanded investment in habitat.
Great. I'm going to pass things off to the ranking member.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Number of things that Senator Tester mentioned I think are really important. I won't go back into them, but the FSA staffing is very important. Obviously, we want to work with you to address that. He also emphasized the importance of crop insurance and the safety net, as I did in my opening comment. Do you agree that those have to be absolute priorities in the upcoming Farm Bill,
Yes.
updating those?
Yes.
Okay. The emergency, we put together the WIP Plus program and then utilized it, and then came back and utilized it again. You brought it out and called it ERP, Emergency Relief Program. Phase 1 worked very well. We were very pleased with that. Phase 2, as you know, we weren't quite as pleased with in terms of how you formulated it. My request to you going forward is that you would work with us if we utilize that WIP Plus program, or as you call it, ERP, and ELRP. Again, I think you did a lot of good, but we would like to coordinate with you on how it's implemented, if utilized going forward.
You want me to respond to that, Senator?
Yeah.
There are three groups of people that we're dealing with when it comes to ERP. There's the group that has crop insurance or NAPE coverage, where they have information and data that was provided to us, and we pre-populated the application, tried to reduce the time to get resources satisfied. That's phase 1. Phase 2 was focused on the people that did not have, that there are people that are greatest at risk, that don't have any of those protections. Try to get them into that system. If there's money left over from phase 2, our expectation is to take a look at the other group, which is the group that, because of their losses, were didn't trigger an indemnity under crop insurance, that they would then be in a position to be able to receive resources. And we're learning from this experience, and I would expect and anticipate that we need to look at that in terms of this year's ERP program. Good. Having said that, Senator, there's not enough money in that program.
I know, and that was part of it, which is why I registered concerns but left it at that. But no, that's what I hope you'd say, and that's good. We'll work with you going forward. I think, again, as far as that countercyclical safety net, that, getting that right and crop insurance right, updating it like we're talking about, will help diminish the need for some of these other disaster assistance programs. So again, incredibly important. In one of the areas also I want to ask about is the pest management policies. Some of the issues we've seen with glyphosate, chlorpyrifos, some of those products that our farmers and ranchers have been using for years and years and years now are being taken off the market, not necessarily through your actions, but through court actions. It can be kind of state by state. It's creating a difficult patchwork for our producers out there. What can we do about that? And it's also creating a lot of uncertainty for them. I mean, they're buying these products and they can't use them. It really is getting to be an issue that USDA needs to take a leadership role in terms of helping our farmers and ranchers from the standpoint of understanding what they do and the certainty they need as they run their operations.
Well, I'd say a couple things on that. I think, first of all, you're right. We need to be making sure that as other agencies of government make decisions that could impact and affect producers, that we have done a good enough job of educating them about the impact on producers. And I'm fairly confident that our pest management folks are doing that at USDA, that they are providing the technical and scientific and detailed information about the impact and effect of what EPA may be considering. Then secondly, to the extent that we can work with the industry to make sure that as things are restricted in some way, that the labeling is what it needs to be able to provide clear understanding of when and under what circumstances certain things can in fact be used. And then third, if there is a way in which our NRCS capacities can be used in a way to mitigate the consequences of some of this, we ought to be obviously directing our resources to do so. And I think our research folks also have a responsibility to ask the question, are there ways in which we can, if we can't use this, what is the alternative? And we need to provide that alternative to our producers through extension.
Like-kind exchanges, the average age of the farmer nowadays is about 60 years old, which of course I think is remarkably young, but for most people, 60 years old is, you know, we've got to get this next generation into farming. One of the tools they use is 1031 like-kind exchanges. And the administration has come out proposing limitations on 1031 like-kind exchanges. But you know the capital barriers to getting into production agriculture. We've got to help this next generation get into farming. That's an important tool.
Well, I would say that that's one of the reasons why we've asked for greater flexibility in our loan programs, so that we're in a position to help.
Yeah, we need to do more with the beginning farmer and the other loan programs as well. But you would agree those are important tools that our farmer, and that it is an important part of transitioning this next generation into agriculture.
It is, Senator, but the reality is that there are so many needs. I mean, we have to take a look at where does the resource come from to do all the stuff that we want done, that we've all talked about here in this committee and that we're talking about in our budget. I mean, it's a balance.
Yeah, no, I understand. We have to figure out good common sense ways to accomplish it. Again, thank you for being here today and for your work.
You bet.
Senator Baldwin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Vilsack, it's great to have you back before the committee today. Before I get to my questions, I would like to just thank you for prioritizing the Dairy Business Innovation Initiative in your budget. In the time since its inclusion in the 2018 Farm Bill, millions of dollars have gone to dairy producers, including those in Wisconsin, enabling businesses to expand their product lines and increase their market share. These small dollar grants have been incredibly meaningful to my state's world-renowned dairy and cheese industry, so appreciate that prioritization. Wisconsin dairy farmers have also led the way in implementing managed grazing to sustain herds. This practice, when done right, can go a long way in improving soil health, plant diversity, and water quality. For years, Wisconsin grazers and those interested in pursuing managed grazing have made it clear to me that the success of their operation is significantly improved when they're able to consult a grazing expert, specifically a knowledgeable technician who can help address the unique needs of their operation and can save farmers valuable time and get them on an expedited path to profitability, improved water quality, and climate resilience. I was able to secure funding for the Grazing Lands Conservation Initiative in the fiscal years 2022 and 2023. And this funding was intended to begin meeting the needs for grazing technical assistance for the first time in over a decade. So Secretary Vilsack, could you share with me the agency's plan to allocate these funds so that technical assistance can be made available? But additionally, I would note that funds were not included in the fiscal year 24 budget, and so I'm curious to know how the USDA plans to sustain this operation.
Senator, I may stand to be corrected in the answer I'm about to give you, so bear with me if I'm misstating something. The NRCS has basically outlined a variety of factors that we want to basically invest our conservation resources in. And one of them has to do with grazing, and one of them has to do with rotational grazing and proper management as part of their climate-smart practices. And so I think from a standpoint of NRCS, we see this as kind of already included in the suite of 45 practices that we've identified that we want to target our resources, we want to direct IRA resources towards based on the requests from farmers that we get. There is a significant backlog. I suspect that there are some producers in Wisconsin that are waiting for, they have a plan, they're waiting for the resources from NRCS, and we're really trying to focus on reducing that backlog and then basically making sure that the EQIP, CSP, all of those resources are effectively invested in climate-smart practices. That's in addition to the fact that many Wisconsin producers will also be engaged and involved in the Climate-Smart Commodity Partnership Initiative. And I know that there are management practices included in many of the projects that we sponsor and will be sponsoring in Wisconsin. So you'll also have opportunities within that partnership initiative to also see significant investment in those practices.
Okay. I'll certainly want to follow up and be able to track this with some granularity. I'd like to next ask about avian influenza, which has contributed to major increases in egg prices this year. The Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service line for the Emergency Preparedness and Response Initiatives saw a minor increase in your budget. How will this budget proposal ensure that needs are met to fully address the spread of avian influenza, including providing quarantine and inspection services to producers and funding for state agencies and universities that are conducting avian influenza testing?
This is a great question, and I appreciate you raising it because it basically allows me to indicate that there are a number of tools that we're bringing to the HPAI fight, and one of those tools is the Commodity Credit Corporation. So APHIS is receiving additional resources from the CCC fund, which is essentially providing resources to allow us to help farmers deal with the detection, eradication, and restoration of their facilities. And so there's a complement. You just can't look at the four corners of the budget. You have to look at also the additional resources that we're providing. In addition, when we basically create resources for research, there are a number of research projects that involve this, that are underway at universities that are getting, they aren't specifically on a line item, but they're involved potentially in an AFRI effort. We're also meeting with the industry. I think there's more work to be done here in terms of encouraging not just the development of biosecurity plans, but the implementation of those plans. Our producers, our commercial operations have done a much better job than they did in 2014-15 because we didn't see quite the spread from commercial operations that we did. But we need to continue to be very vigilant about that. We need to take a look at the design of these facilities in terms of the transmission airflow, which can potentially complicate things. We need to make sure that we continue our research on vaccines with the understanding that that we're not there yet. We're not even close to being there yet. We don't have a commercial operation willing to produce the vaccine. We haven't matched it identically to the issue that we've got right now. And there are trade complications as a result of the use of vaccines. So it's really complicated. Some people like to simplify it, but it's very complicated. So all of that is in the budget in various pieces. It may not be specifically identified as such, but it's all in the budget.
Thank you. I yield back.
I want to thank you, Secretary Vilsack, and you, Mr. Rapp, for being here today. Questions for the record are due by next Wednesday, April 5th, and we'd appreciate responses back from USDA within the next 30 days. And thank you both. And with that, this hearing is adjourned.